it became a passion for me actually 5 years ago when I joined Lucid. So, I've got about 25 years of automotive experience all around the globe, but unfortunately, 20 years of those were in the internal combustion engine. And I, love automotive industry, whether it's ICE or EV, but now that I am working on an electric vehicle, there is a bigger picture to this, as you said. I think, the so a little bit about me, born in Pakistan, but at an early age moved to Canada, and then Canada, US is where, most of my childhood was at, and then, after engineering, in 1998, I joined General Motors and Ford Motor Company, Fiat Chrysler at that time, and Magna, and have been working all over the world. I think I've worked in about 11 countries, different projects for these companies. And then, in 2014, a call came from out of nowhere from Saudi Arabia, and it was a big surprise because I actually didn't know that there was an automotive thing happening in Saudi Arabia. So when the Ministry of Industry and Commerce at that time called and said, hey, can you join and help us write the automotive policy for the kingdom, it was a great honor for me, to tell you the truth. I think the call came in February, and in May I was in Riyadh, working with my team. So things were moving really fast. In 2019, as you just said, PIF in 2018 decided to invest in Lucid Motors to start the automotive ecosystem in the country. And at that time in 2019, I let my job after 5 years with the ministry go and join Lucid Motors as one of the executives. And since then, it's been a roller coaster ride because I always knew I'm going to be bringing back and lit the fire in the start of auto ecosystem in the country. So I couldn't agree more with you about what we need to do. And I think that the path is very challenging, but the results are so satisfying that we can even see that now. We've taken very small steps, but they're very significant. And I'll talk about those a little bit more in detail with you.
Amazing. I think another challenge that maybe the sector of EV vehicles tends to face is around adoption. I recall having a similar problem with solar energy in Saudi Arabia in the earlier days. There was always this conversation of, well, Saudi's too hot to handle solar, we won't be able to store it, batteries are too expensive. Are you looking at the life cycle aspect of it? What are the points of strength that Lucid is drawing upon when it's looking at this bigger arena?
So, Lucid Motors is a technological, breakthrough in electric vehicles. And when I say that, look, I've looked at all the, EVs, competitor EVs. And one of the greatest things that we've done is we've taken our battery technology. We were a battery company first, and we have 20 plus millions of miles over our batteries because we were supplying batteries to Formula E for many generations. And then we now have our own car. So we've taken all that technology breakthrough in battery systems, in our drive units, and really made that efficient to a level that has really not been achieved by any of our competitors. They don't even come close. But, I think the goal is really to keep working on that. And as you just said, there are a lot of perceptions out there, and which are really very old, truths that are just floating around. And one of it is that, look, temperatures, could play a major role in somehow degrading the battery performance. It is true that but a lot of people don't realize that the cold temperature actually plays very much more worse conditions for electric vehicles than hot temperatures. And the key to control these temperature fluctuations is to have a battery management system and the cooling system of the battery itself. Again, efficiency comes back into play, where you have to use the most minimalist of energy from that battery to cool that battery, right? So if you start using 10-15% of your battery power to keep the battery, from hot temperature to cool or cool temperature to hot, to keep it at the optimum levels, then you're losing the range. So what Lucid has been able to do is really take very little energy to keep our battery at that optimum temperatures. And that is, something that is going to allow the consumer to really keep the longest range, that they really need to drive the vehicle for.
I think what I'm hearing as well in all of this, Sir Faisal, is that you've touched on the power of sports to really unlock innovation. It's almost as if you're saying that there's joy embedded into the DNA of Lucid itself, which will hopefully be a huge attractor. But if we get into the nitty-gritty of the resource scarcity and some of the other flip side, let's say, of the conversation around sustainability of the electric vehicles themselves and the resources that are going into the makeup of it. If we're drilling down into the elements going into the battery and the like. So it feels like a lifetime ago, but earlier this year, we were probably a good chunk of us were at the Future Minerals Forum, where there was an announcement of 2.5 trillion untapped mineral deposit potential for Saudi Arabia. There's a huge question around the geopolitics of rare earth minerals globally, knowing where they might reside and who's tapping into them today. Questions around justice, who gets to tap into them, how do they extract them? NIMBY, not in my backyard. These are really nice, things to tap into as long as it's not happening on my continent. It's not for a lack of resources, but it's for a lack of evolution to develop them. So when you're looking at all of those complexities around it, what is Lucid doing in terms of looking at the value chain and sustainability through it?
Yeah, this is really the fundamental thinking behind a Lucid. When we really design our product and when we look at where we want to be in the future, this fundamentally really drives how we think at Lucid. So it's a great question because, while other OEMs are thinking of giving range back to the consumer by making the batteries bigger, what Lucid is thinking is how to make that battery smaller and give them more. So it's a fundamental, sustainability thinking that you have to embed in your DNA that reduce the material usage when it comes to battery, rare earth metals in the battery, or when it comes to steel, aluminum. A lot of people don't realize that our motors are 40% smaller than our competitors, but then give 30% more horsepower. Our batteries are giving you 5 miles per kilowatt hour, while our competitors are giving less than 4. So that type of thinking and efficiency is that really brings us back to preserve the mineral and the metal usage that is available then to do some other things, produce more cars or produce more appliances or wherever they are needed. So that thinking really has to go into the design process and the engineering process. And at our DNA, we are an engineering, a highly technological firm that looks at that. And then we transfer it to our supply chain. So that's really the next step, is where we take that thinking and take it to our supply chain, where our leather supplier is very, we go into so much details when we're selecting these suppliers, like what are you doing with your carbon emissions? Are you a sustainable ambassador like us? So that thinking then goes into our supply chain also. And then after that, of course, into our construction of our plants. So we'll touch base on our plant in Saudi later, and then I can tell you that we are taking that same methodology into our plant construction, operations, and then how to kind of translate that around us in the whole ecosystem.
It's like you read my mind. I was going to start asking about that because I heavily recall the eyes of one of the young, since we were talking about youth earlier this morning, gentleman that was so into construction of cars throughout his own educational pathways, who always partake in hackathons, in competitions in his university, and ended up in a job where he couldn't do much with everything that he's learned because he wanted to get his hands dirty. And the moment that there was an announcement of the first plant of Lucid in Saudi Arabia, his eyes lit up, and I saw him quickly jump ship from wherever he was to Lucid. So you're lucky to have him, as it stands.
I think I know who you're talking about.
Potentially, but without naming his name since he's not with us here today. So in a way, that fervor of going beyond to actually delivering that mechanism. Can you give us a bit of the insights around how you're navigating that piece of it?
Yeah, so, Lucid, as you know, started our AMP2 plant in the kingdom. We broke ground in September, on the Saudi Day, Saudi National Day in 2023, and we picked that day for a reason. It's a new beginning for auto industry. Just like, the Saudi Day when something really, amazing started, Lucid started their plant. And then, we were happy to say that in record time, we were able to get our SKD facility built, where we can now do 5,000 vehicles assembled in the kingdom. A month ago, 2 months ago, we started. We have another star on our collar, which is basically that we've exported the first Saudi assembled vehicle to another GCC country. So a proud moment for Saudi for that. And we've, the way we are kind of going about it is we really wanted to start this operations before the CBU, the complete build unit plant, is fully built around it, because that requires human skills, it requires supply chain. Now we have a stake in the ground. Saudi is assembling vehicles. The first electric vehicle out of Saudi is now in the market, even outside of Saudi Arabia. So that proves a lot of things to the supply chain. It proves a lot of, lots of check marks for the supply chain from a risk point of view. And it also gives us the time to start training the human capital. So we have an amazing partner in Human Resource Development Fund. They've signed a US $50 million grant to us to train Saudi talent over 10 years, where we send these, our employees from Saudi to United States, to Arizona, to California. They work there, they get trained there for 6 months, and then they come back and contribute. So from a human capital point of view, we have the HRDF fund. I just inaugurated with Ministry of Industry and also with PIF, the NAVA, which is the National Automobile Vehicle Academy, which is only 5 minutes away from our plant in King Abdullah Economic City. So the first 200 batch of technicians and then our manufacturing associates already started training. So I think you have to keep attacking it from all angles: the perception, the human capital, the supply chain, and also getting the ecosystem, the charging infrastructure, and all of that, ready for the mass adoption, which has already started.
Yeah, I have to promise everyone in the room, this is the first time I sit with Mr. Faisal, so I'm not sure how you're reading my brain, but mashallah, you're jumping to the next piece of it that I had in mind, because specifically when it comes to the policy ecosystem and how it's unfolding across the board. I think I've mentioned again briefly perspective when we said net zero by 2060. It was definitely in alignment with the circular carbon economy as a framework. So where there's a huge component that you would be playing on the reduce side of the equation, but that will require almost a complete shift of how we're dealing with the issues. I remember in my early days as a policy nerd, looking under the hood of what 𝗖𝗢𝗡𝗡𝗖𝗧 was doing and learning that Saudi is the only country in the region that has a fuel efficiency standard. I would have loved the standard to be a bit higher. It's starting to evolve as we see, but nevertheless, it was the only country in the region overall to have that. So as the role of EVs come into play, we're hearing a lot about hydrogen, we're hearing a lot about alternative types of fuels, direct carbon capture in the vehicles themselves, depending on the area that we're looking into. What role are you envisioning, and what are you looking to ask from the policy ecosystem? What shifts are you looking at?
Yeah, I think there's two crucial roles that have to continuously be hammered and then be fought through, and I think policymakers have a very very important role to play. So when we talk about infrastructure development, there has to be policies that are supporting that growth. Charging is something that is on people's mind, and we can't ignore that. Even though 90% of your charging happens at home, but people still think that, look, we need to have that option available because they're so used to driving and seeing a petrol gas station, and they never have that concern that I can't fill my car up. And then the second one is that informed consumer aspect. A Lucid Air, is the longest range electric vehicle that is out there in the world. It will, on a single charge, give you 838, 840 kilometers of range. That outlasts any internal combustion engine in its class for mileage or kilometers. But the consumer always will think, where will I go and charge if I am going from here to Riyadh? He can go or she can go from here to the mom without stopping anywhere and have enough charge, left on it to even drive in the mom. But when they have to come back, maybe they'll have to charge. So I think we need to continue to work with policymakers to make sure that the infrastructure is getting there. EVIC from EIF is doing an amazing job. They've started, putting a lot of stations within Riyadh and Jeddah, and I think the next steps talking to them is going to be between cities, where I think it's going to be a really key, crucial decision for the consumer to buy vehicles. Not Lucid Air because it's a sedan, but our next products are definitely going to be used between the cities. And I think on the other side, there has to be a very dedicated policy on the consumer side of incentives. So you can incentivize the OEMs and the supply chain, and the infrastructure, charging infrastructure, but there has to be, some incentives available, for the consumer that kind of draws them closer to making that decision a little bit more easier. So from a policies point of view, I think that those two type of policies are going to pay really, really dividends if we start getting those in.
Yeah, I think that makes absolute sense from the overall picture of what you try to need to create within the ecosystem to enable this to happen. But some might argue that there could be a barrier to entry from an economics perspective, that this might be pricing certain people out of these types of solutions. I think there's this perception, justifiably so, with your earlier models of Lucid being a luxury brand of sorts. The way that China, for example, was able to really bring down the economies of scale was because of cheap vehicles that they were able to deploy. There was massive and clarity of policy. There were procurement conditionalities into where those solutions tended to enter the system, let's say, but also no lack of critical mineral pipeline, let's say, to inject into it. So it would be interesting to understand from your perspective how you're attacking the economics side of it.
Yeah, I think I'll go back to the whole efficiency, aspect, because I think our goal was to make the most efficient vehicle in the luxury segment, four-door sedan, which has a very small market. But as we publicly stated, we have a full-size SUV now coming out as our next product very soon. It's going to be delivered in North America, and then soon after that in the Middle East as our second market. But and then we're going to take that same technology into a much lower priced crossover and a CUV. So our goal is always been to prove our technology as the best technology when it comes from an efficiency point of view, and then translate it into products that are available for mass public at a lower price point. And I think that is what the public demand is. We understand that. When it comes to a lot of the our competitors, as you mentioned, from other countries and especially from China, I think they are attacking. They're doing it on the reverse order. They're attacking it on the mass volume, lower technology, In some cases, yes, their technology is very appealing, but when it comes to efficiency, there is no comparison. I can definitely tell you that. And then I think they will then try to raise up. It's a much harder, route to take. Personally, being in the auto industry, once you're branded, something, it's hard to change that perception. You are then, regarded as the lower, price brand but more adoption is good. I think from that point of view, we welcome competition, more EVs on the road, regardless of what the brand is. I think it helps the policies, it helps the infrastructure development. It also helps the consumer to realize how good it is to drive an electric vehicle and how economical it is. Because one of the perceptions, as you correctly mentioned, is the total cost of ownership. The total cost of ownership on an electric vehicle is significantly less because the part numbers in an electric vehicle goes down from, if you're talking about roughly about one-third part numbers in an electric vehicle from an internal combustion engine. So the servicing issue goes away. You only have to take your car maybe once a year. And then Lucid provides a 2-year service program. So for 2 years, you're fully covered. And then you have an 8-year warranty on your battery systems and your powertrain. So I think the total cost of ownership goes down significantly. And as we move into the lower, cost models also, our consumers definitely going to benefit. The cost premium is also a perception. I think, about 5 years ago, I would agree with that statement, that the electric vehicles were very significantly higher. But Lucid Air today starts, a lot of people are surprised, it's at 299,000 Saudi riyals plus VAT. And we have in our segment internal combustion engine vehicles that are significantly higher priced than that. So we are giving that option of a luxury four-door sedan, to our customers at a much lower price in GCC than some of our ICE competitors are.
Awesome. Well, before we open it up to the floor with questions, if you may allow me, I'll wrap up with one final take from our perspective. I think Saudi Arabia has a unique opportunity, and you're walking that deployment of opportunity, let's say, of showing a pragmatic, realistic, responsible way of dealing with these issues. Solutions that are not only looking at issues from an ideological perspective or preferences, but rather pragmatism and responsibility of what needs to be deployed within it. So if we're thinking about the issue that we're facing and the task at hand, what does sustainability really mean? It's about looking at, maybe some could call it ESG, so economy, governance, sustainability from an environmental perspective as well. But from our perspective, it needs to be a step further, being responsible people with values within this part of the world, and being responsible of the ripple effect that we may be able to create either with the right or wrong decisions. My wish is for you to succeed. My wish is for me to be able to open my window in the city of Riyadh and smell clean air rather than all of these fumes. My wish is for us to have a city that's quieter and that's more appealing, higher quality of life, lower instances of asthma. And we thank you for your work in that regards. And with that, maybe...
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Do you have any... Sure. Any questions? We have space for 1 or 2 questions. Please.
Excellent work, by the way. Big fan of what you do, Princess Mashal, for many years. I was with 𝗪𝗧𝗪 earlier, and I've been following you for a long time. My simple question is, look at the size of the problem at a country level, how many vehicles, how much fuel we are consuming, etc. And this solution seems perfect, but obviously it's for a very small luxury segment. how are we gonna scale up? How are we gonna look at, solving the mass of the problem? The affordability aspect. Thanks.
I think excellent question. I think every, big, large-scale problem like this, it takes time. So that is, it's a baby step approach. I think Lucid opens the door, for manufacturing of electric vehicles and the awareness of the consumers, and I think that is going to open doors for other electric vehicles. And we've already actually seen many enter in the last 1.5 year. And I think we've also keeping, at least the data that I see, that is presented to me, the conversion from internal combustion engine to electric vehicles is picking up every quarter. It's going up. We can definitely tell you that we are outselling any of our ICE competitor in our segment. They're not even close anymore. So I think what they will sell in 2-3 years, we have already sold in 6 months. So I think the awareness is the message is getting out there that they are affordable. Yeah, there is a perception that the cars are expensive, but there are options available. Other OEMs are jumping in. We have seen some of the Chinese manufacturers coming in. We have seen some of the other German competitors now bringing their electric vehicles. And I think by 2030, the Saudi Green Initiative that says 30% of new car sales in Riyadh, I think that could become a reality, because one thing that I know about Saudi Arabia, and I think most of you agree, is when they set a target, 9 out of 10 times they meet it. So I think I'm super excited, and I think it is going to be a challenge, but policymakers, infrastructure, development, and also OEMs and consumers, the most important, will definitely come out and support this.
Mr. Faisal, my new friend, thank you for withstanding all of those questions, and thank you all for listening to us, and looking forward to the rest.